back, everybody. We are back. It's the Working Brother with another talk, and this time we've got George here with us again. Welcome back, George. How you doing?
I am doing great. Just been traveling a little bit. I'm in Thailand now, so I
Yeah,
no
you
longer
definitely
have
have a
my
tan.
library.
You definitely
I
have
no
a
longer
tan
have my
compared to your
library.
last visit. And there
Yeah.
is a little bit of
Okay.
lag between us, which is obvious to the viewers as well. But yeah, thank you for coming back on. You've got another interesting slide set. Well, interesting and educational to some. It might be boring to others. Thank you for stopping by again, everybody who is a subscriber. Everybody who's not a subscriber, remember you can find us on Telegram over here, or you can just subscribe to the YouTube and follow just the video section of the Working Brothers work. Now, let's get to the subject of today, which is geopolitical significance of the Russia-Ukraine war. George has prepared a nice slide set for us. Do you want to take it away from now, George?
Yeah, I got like stacks of slides, slide sets that I've done, from the Felix Rex shows on, for over a year, regarding geopolitical theory. So trying to finish up each one and sequence everything. So this is what this represents. Because we need to go over everything. It's what's flabbergasting is, we're 1 year into this, and the mainstream media is still pushing the narrative that, Putin did this for no reason and there's no geostrategic analysis
Wait, wait, wait,
whatsoever.
wait,
Or at
wait.
least,
Wait, wait, wait. So you're back here with some more Russian propaganda, is what you're telling me.
oh,
For our
absolutely.
comedy show. This is a comedy show that is like, basically Russian propaganda comedy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what we're trying to do here is just, I mean, well, it's a good way just to segue into the next part, is really just to do just a game theoretic analysis of what happens if you do the Americentric original five power center doctrine. And I've been doing that off the top of my head because I learned it like 30 years ago, and I need to actually sit down and do a PowerPoint slide on that, because a lot of the viewers think I switched from that into the six power center theory, into the Russian centric six power center strategy a little bit too quickly. So we'll double
Hmm.
tap that later. But right now, I just want to start getting rid of these slide sets that I've already got, and then
Hmm.
we'll catch up in the other areas, because I just got tons of these things. When I did the shows with Matt Bracken, he wanted to do more of a live show. I want to do more of a systematic thing. The geopolitical strategic stuff has got to be done systematic. People have to learn one variable at a time, the factors for the variable, switch to the next variable, and then the factors to those variables, one thing at a time. Otherwise, there's too many balls in the air. So there's tons of other channels that talk about day-to-day news. There's tons of channels that talk about the news in each region of Eurasia or each region of the world,
Hmm.
obviously. There's channels that talk about, individual pipelines and railroad infrastructural projects as individual isolated random events, but we're tying it together into national PMISI and dime strategies. PMISI being political, military, economic, social, infrastructural, informational integration, or dime is a little bit simpler. It's diplomatic, infrastructural, military, and economic. So you get a little bit more variables with the PMISI, but you're still trying to. These are the basic variables that countries try to build up their infrastructure, to build up their economy, to build up their military power, to build up their diplomatic power. That's essentially the way it goes. So Pomisi's got more variables okay, instead of diplomatic, it says political, but diplomatic, political, same thing. Your economic is the same. Your M for military is the same. Your social is a little bit different because your social and cultural ties are very much regional. They're very much linguistic and definitely religious aspects that make up one's culture. And then your infrastructural is the same, but in Pomisi you have informational, which now that we're in the informational age, we went from the sailing ships where they had to carry written letters around. We went to the old slow telegram where they had to do dot, dot, dash and, the Morse code stuff. We went into telecommunications when you could talk. But yeah, ever since the internet was invented and computers and word processing and all of that, now information shifts from one area to the next much more rapidly. You can get all kinds of businesses integrated. So your informational in Pomisi is actually a big thing. And then you have the cyber crimes and things like that. So there's a lot of facets.
We actually discussed Pomisi and all the other acronyms, so to say, in the previous comedy shows that we did. You can I'll leave a link somewhere to the appropriate one, either down here or maybe up there somewhere. Yeah. But George, let's get right into today's slides from the introduction onwards.
All right. So this is the 1-year anniversary. So it's a good point to come back and hit this stuff in some points again, because the CSIS, Brookings Institution, the AEI where Frederick Kagan is, and Robert Kagan is at Brookings Institute, and CSIS and Institute for Study of War has Kimberly Kagan. The PNAC crowd really is in control of the major DC think tanks. They mostly come out of the Yale and Harvard Grand Strategies classes. So in this video, that being said, we have Wesley Clark from his presidential run from 2007 talking about how he started becoming aware that there's this dual state. Now, the dual state theory was started, it's been talked about since Plato, but it's really kind of made famous because of Hans Morgenthau, the realist professor at University of Chicago, where Leo Strauss was. So they're also in this.
Before you get into it too deep, let's play a little clip of the Wesley Clark and just let the audience get a taste of what's actually going on.
Yeah.
That would be here, and then.
Some hard-nosed people took over the direction of American policy, and they never bothered to inform the rest of us. I went through the Pentagon 10 days after 9/11. I couldn't stay away from Mother Army. I went back there to see Don Rumsfeld. I'd worked for him as a White House fellow in the 1970s. All this is in the book. And I said, am I doing okay on CNN? He said, yeah, fine. He said, I'm thinking about it. He says, I read your book, and he said, this is a book that talks about the Kosovo campaign. And he said, I just want to tell you, he said, nobody's going to tell us where or when we can bomb. Nobody. He said, I'm thinking of calling this a floating coalition. What do you think about that? I said, well, sir, thanks for reading my book. And, he said, thanks, that's all the time I've got. Really. And I went downstairs. I was leaving the Pentagon, and an officer from the Joint Staff called me into his office and said, I want you to know, he said, sir, we're going to attack Iraq. And I said, why? He said, we don't know. he said, I said, well, did they tie Saddam to 9/11? He said, no. He said, but I guess they don't know what to do about terrorism, and so they think, but they can attack states, and they want to look
15
strong, and
years
so
ago, just to
I
point
guess
out
they
to
think
everyone.
if they take down a state, it will intimidate the terrorists. And you know, it's like that old saying he said, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem has to be a nail. Well,
I think that's enough of that for now.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's fine. I encourage people to watch that whole video and watch a whole bunch of videos. I kind of dismissed it back in 2007. I was a true neocon believer. Uh, yeah, if you could get rid of some of the dictators in the Middle East, wouldn't it be so much better of a place? I mean, why not? So I didn't pay too much of it. Yeah, I didn't pay too much of attention to it because that was 2007. I didn't go to Iraq till February 2010, and so yeah, I didn't know anything about it. But boy, that was a long time ago. I got to see a lot of stuff over there because I stayed over there for 12 years,
Yeah.
and I got to stay during the departure from Kabul,
Mhm.
and all of that. Yeah, that whole time period is very interesting. So, that being said, he opens that up by talking about some hard-nosed people running it, and he's later on in the video he starts talking about Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, Cheney, Rumsfeld, of course.
Mhm.
Before that, he's been in the army since 1966, 65, something like that. I think 66 is what it says in his bio in Vietnam. So, I mean, he knows Elliot Abrams. He came up through the whole. He worked for Alexander Haig. So the whole neoconservative crowd, he's very familiar with. So he's talking about what he's concerned about is how few people actually make decisions for the government. And okay, I keep on saying this is in November 2007. See, he's talking about the end of the second term of the Bush administration. But then when you get into the Obama administration, what's fascinating there is not much changes. Yes, Obama gets out of Afghanistan, and then he starts talking about, well, the problem of getting rid of Saddam Hussein is that out of Iraq is the Shia and Iran start taking over in southern Iraq, and most of the Persian Gulf area on the eastern seaboard of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar is chiefly Shia.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
Sunnis are on the other side. So what he starts, that being said, what he starts talking about in that video and some of the other videos is if Saddam Hussein is gone and the American U.S. Army pulls out of Iraq, then who are the Saudis going to get to fight the Shia? Because the House of Assad, because it's a Wahhabi country, um, Islamic fundamentalists only believe that a caliph should exist. So family dynasty governments are antithetical to Islam, to Sunni Wahhabist Islam. So the House of Saud does not really arm its own military because the first thing that they would do with loaded guns would be to overthrow the House of Saud and create a caliph. So that means the House of Saud and the other benefactors that are Wahhabists, ever since the 1979 revolution, they've agreed to export the Sunni revolution to other countries. So what he's talking about in this video and some of the other videos
I
is
think
that the
didn't that
Saudis
start in the modern, like other than Afghanistan and obviously OBL as he's called, um, didn't that also take effect in like the Balkans in the 90s? Were there, some extremists exported to the Balkans from Saudi? I think there were.
Yeah, after 1979, the Grand Mosque seizure,
Mm-hmm.
there was a major push. The House of Saud had to capitulate with the Wahhabis that they would start building Wahhabi mosques all over the place. So one of the first places that they started building them was, in Bosnia. So then,
Tell us,
yes, the House of Saud.
for those who don't know, what is a Wahhabi as opposed to any other Muslim? Let's put it that way. Like, can you clear up?
Yeah, and what was it about? In the mid to late 1800s, Ibn al-Saud had formed a union with al-Wahhab, who believes he wanted everything to go back to 7th century Islamism.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted a very strict form of Islam. So even though Wahhabism doesn't necessarily support family dynasties, this is one of these instances where the House of Saud was formed in partnership with a form of Islam that's ultimately against family dynasties. So it's one of those things where the fall of the dynasties is baked in from the beginning. So so this union of Wahhabism and the House of Saud in Saudi Arabia is a very kind of uneasy union, because the populace would actually like to get rid of the House of Saud because it is the home of Mecca and Medina, and go back to a caliph. And a caliph, what that is, the first 4 caliphs after Muhammad were decided by basically a handful of imams elect the leader. So that's what the caliph is. So they would like the imams in Mecca to elect the next caliph, which means they got to get rid of the House of Saud. So so the House of Saud said, well, if you keep us in power, we will export Wahhabism, Sunni fundamentalism everywhere else. So the joke in the Middle East, whether you're in Saudi Arabia actually there is a lot of terrorism in Saudi Arabia, but in Qatar or the UAE is, why doesn't terrorism happen there? Well, because they pay for it to happen everywhere else. Yeah, it's the joke. That's the truth. So when you get into
That's a good joke for our comedy channel. Yeah, what can I say? Comedy.
Oh yeah, I'm in and out of the hotels in Dubai, and I talk about, I meet all kinds of people that come from Damascus and everywhere, and we have great conversations. So yeah, the House of Saud will build the mosques and the madrasas, but then the Wahhabi hardliners will start building the terrorist training camps. So yeah, there's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them in Bosnia, as you know, and then of course those hardline groups have moved into Kosovo. You're in your area, and you
immediate neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and then before in the videos I did with Matt Bracken, we were talking about the Saudis started funding the Pashtuns because the Pashtuns are believed to be 6 or 7 of the lost tribes of Israel, and they're Islamic, so they support them because they're the sons of Abraham that followed the right prophet path in their beliefs, and they're supposed to go back and attack Israel to bring back the Mahdi. But I don't want to get. We want to get back into that another
let's not
day.
get too esoteric. Yeah.
When you get into the backstory on what he's talking about in these videos, there is a lot of backstory in this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, to the point
let's go to the next one, and let's play the video that you've got for us. Just a couple of seconds of Putin is crazy, because we all love a Putin is crazy video. Because Putin is bad. Haha, funny. And then we'll go to.
They call it MacGyvering. Fixing them up to be able to do other things they weren't supposed to be able to do. They're extremely creative. They use their weapons well. There is no hint, by the way, of any corruption to do with the army. That, you know, all that is very straightforward. And the other thing that has been, again, not surprising if you knew Ukraine, but really, you know, by comparison to other societies and other times and places, Ukrainian society, the way in which spontaneous volunteer.
I can't hold it in. Did she say that Ukraine is known for not being corrupt? Okay, hold on.
Groups have organized themselves, whether to help the army or to help refugees, or to run cities in the absence of, you know, I've got a story coming out today about cities and towns under occupation, people really rising to the challenge in extraordinary ways. It makes it, you know, it's always been a kind of grassroots society. It's better ground up. You know, the state was always much weaker than the society, and it was always a place where people were suspicious of power, but able to organize on the ground. And that all of that has played out just unbelievably well. I was in Ukraine last summer. I've been several times, 3 times actually, since the war began.
Wow.
And
She went to Lvov,
I was spent a few days in Odessa, and, you know, just the range of people and groups and organizations who are, you know, creatively seeking to help the war effort is astonishing. And I think Ukrainians deserve an enormous amount of credit for that. I mean, again, it went.
Is that enough?
Yeah, that's enough. I'm really glad you played that part. I mean, just any 5 minutes of her talking is just, you know, it's just unbelievable. Yes, I was, I'm here in Thailand, so I've been riding around on my motorcycle with, you know, with these YouTube videos playing in my helmet, and I wanted to stop right then and save that video. Make sure I save that because that was just priceless. She's saying that there's no corruption in the Ukrainian military. I was talking to a Finnish retired diplomat, and when he started looking at these sums of money, his first reaction was, boy, you know, they say 25% of this money goes straight into corruption.
Yeah.
You know, so if you send you know, $1 billion someplace, well, 250 million goes immediately into somebody's Swiss bank account or Dubai bank account.
Yeah.
So, and then in Ukraine it's even worse, right? So, and then I'll later on we're gonna play the Vietnam video from John Shockwell where none of this money goes to where it's supposed to go, and very little weaponry actually goes to the soldiers. And once you get to these corrupt countries, so we not only fund these super corrupt, inefficient countries, you know, in Vietnam, but we've done it in Latin America, all over Latin America. Boy, I had a long conversation about that with a former FBI, a current FBI agent a while back. He got mad at me for saying that, and I was like, which name? I was like saying, name one Mexican cartel that doesn't have a bunch of its operatives that weren't originally trained in the United States at Fort Benning. It's like we train people, they go work for the federales for a few years, then after that they switch over to their cartels because they pay more. I mean, that's all over Latin America. So we do it in Vietnam. We do it, you know, Latin America, and then in the Middle East, it's the same. And now we're doing the same thing in Ukraine. So when she says something like that,
don't forget Africa.
Oh well, yeah. Well, we got John Shockwell in there. He was a case officer in Angola. So yeah, I watched tons of video on that. Well, plus from reading back in the day too. So the United States does nothing but fund corrupt governments. So if you know the historical backstory and what she's talking about, it's not just Ukraine. It's everything that the United States has done for the past 70 years. So yeah, so let's go to the next one. Okay, oh, that's Bill Kristol. So of course, Wesley Clark, in either this video or one of the other ones I watched from that era, you know, he starts talking about the peanut crowd, Bill Kristol, editor for the Weekly Standard, but it was also what was the other one? With Bill Buckley, he was from Yale. They're former Yaleys, of course. Oh, and Applebaum taught at the Grand Strategy. She was an adjunct professor, I believe, at the Grand Strategies classes for several years.
So what you're saying, it's a very small clique. It's
yeah. So the reason why I want to talk about that is because Wesley Clark starts talking about the small clique that runs it, but here in this video we see the connection because it's the Yale and Harvard Grand Strategies classes, and University of Chicago too, that are actually running the government. So you're, later on we're going to get into how that started with Allen Dulles when he shifted over from the OSS when it became the CIA. But we're going to hit that later on. All right. So, one other thing here. Yeah, that whole video, that whole interview with Ann Applebaum, she's pushing the we need a psychological understanding of Vladimir Putin. So it's just for the people that watched our video on Fiona Hill. She's basically saying the same thing. So my answer is the same thing. He doesn't need a psychological analysis. This is a geopolitical analysis that they need. All right, let's just go on.
Yeah, as you said before we started recording, you said very eloquently that it's not him that needs psychoanalysis. It's the audience that needs to hear a geostrategic analysis, basically.
Yeah. So there's other people that talk about
Putin.
Yeah, there's other channels that talk about individual pipeline and port projects, but you need to understand that if everything is a hub and spoke network radiating out of Russia, then Russia becomes the center of geopolitical power. So that's the heart of the six power centers strategy. The Russo-centric six power center theory is, Russia's right in the middle. They got all the oil and natural gas and minerals and wood and timber and whatever else, and they just need to feed the industrial centers, which are on the coastal periphery parts of Eurasia, if you're going to put it into Mackinder terms. So what the United States is trying to do is separate the coastal powers from Russia, but it's not just in Germany, it's all of them. Brian Berletic talks about East Asia. I'm in Thailand now. I'm waiting on some paperwork and some bike mods, and I'm going to head into Cambodia to look at the Chinese naval base in Ream. Then I'm going to head up to the Ho Chi Minh Trail and check out Lao. So we'll do more videos as I move. So we'll be talking about the videos.
Get us some good video B-roll from your motorcycle so we can put it up here next time you're on. I'm sure people will enjoy some B-roll of you driving through Thailand and Cambodia more than they will enjoy these slides in the background.
Yeah. Well, for analysts, this is good because
I know.
If you're familiar with one region, I show you the same pattern in the other regions so you can connect the dots. For the average person who hasn't watched the other videos, doesn't know enough about the different areas, what violent extremist groups are operating out of different areas, what color revolutions that the United States has done currently or in the past, the average audience may be a little bit lost in this. But we have to focus on the strategic part and go straight through it, basically for a grad school analyst cloud, because it's otherwise an hour or two video would take 10 hours.
Yeah.
So
tell us about the psychological narrative.
Oh yeah. They're acting as if Putin has no rationality when the United States is pushing NATO eastward to take the ports, because they only have 3 ports: St. Petersburg, Rostov-on-Don, the Crimea area. And of course, the purpose of the Maidan coup was to take over the Black Sea Fleet in Crimea. And I have no idea why Putin would respond negatively, right? So you try to
more Russian propaganda from George. What can I say?
Yeah,
he's been brainwashed, obviously, by the Russian propaganda over the last 14 years.
Well, I was trying to get back and get in touch with Herbert Gintis, who wanted the lateral integration of disciplines. So I wanted to talk to him about that, except for the fact that he died. He died while I was doing something else. Anyway, he was really big in game theory, talking about, you got to use rational choice models, rational actor belief preference constraint models, so you can understand two actors in objective strategic competition. So I bring that same logic here. It's just if player A does this, player B is more likely to respond, with this different strengths and comparative advantages or absolute advantages. They're likely to respond this way or that way. Yeah. So we're just trying to do, okay. So you're on to the next. Where's slide 6? Yeah, all right. So there's the 6 power center doctrine. Yeah, Matt Bracken was nice enough to make that nice little map for me there. So yeah, that shows how Russia, that's the Russo-centric point. So Russia is just building pipelines and ports to all those other areas on that map. So the United States is then trying to block all those infrastructural projects. So when you see the war in Ukraine or the area of getting into Afghanistan, you're trying to separate Russia and China. You're trying to block Russia and China's integration with their energy supplies, because the United States wants to make it so they're getting all their oil and natural gas from the Middle East through the shipping channels that they can block. So if that's the United States' strategy, then Russia and Chinese strategy is going to be to send the pipelines and the railway projects over land and away from the U.S. naval strategies. So when you do the land power versus sea power analysis that Alfred Mackinder turned into a science at Oxford at St. Anthony's College, then you can do a game theoretic approach of, yes, the United States and Great Britain have always played the sea power part, trying to get the coastal powers away from the heartland. So Russia is always trying to integrate with the heartland, with the peripheral powers instead. So this stuff, it's not a psychological approach. This is just basic.
To remind some of the viewers, remind some of the viewers when these theories were first established, like these authors that you talked about.
Okay. Well, the great game, started. Boy, the UK has always played divide and conquer. Against Portugal, and then against the Vikings, because the Vikings always used to invade, Scotland and the UK and Ireland. They started trying to hem in the Vikings and the Germans, I don't know, for hundreds of years. When was St. Petersburg built? What was that? Early 1700s. So the great game of trying to block the Russian Empire in St. Petersburg and the Baltic, is over 250 years old. Catherine the Great took over Crimea in 1783 from the Turks. They've been in Crimea ever since. The Crimean War was in the 1830s, 1840s.
So this is deeply embedded Russian propaganda. It's like historical Russian propaganda that you're coming us with. History. All right, basic history of propaganda.
Yeah. So Halford Mackinder was in the 1890s, got his graduate degrees, and was really into this. And he started, after he got his PhD, he started the geostrategic school at Oxford and ever since then, it's been a formal area of study. So he took what was occurring naturally, and he wrote it into a formalized doctrine. Then the Germans, Ratzel and Haushofer, picked it up in Germany, arguing that the Germans and Russians shouldn't fight; they should integrate. Of course, you're going to integrate through Poland, obviously. So then, once the railroads were invented in the 19th century, boy, then you really got a way to integrate Russia and China. So the UK, the British have always been trying to stop a Ratzel and Haushofer integration between Russia and China. So that's Mackinder started his first. He started the program in 1898, I believe. I think the Pivot Point was written in 1902. He wrote several other books, moved to the United States during the 1930s, Princeton and Yale and Columbia. And then Nicholas Beekman was a Dutch maritime officer that went back to Yale to get his PhD. And he focused more on the choke points, Suez, Gibraltar, Malacca Strait, Hormuz. Since he had been sailing in the South China Sea when he was in the Dutch East Indies, he got very good practical knowledge of that. Went back to Yale, wrote that doctrine of focusing on how to work the buffer zones in the Middle East and Central Asia. That was his big deal, and how to separate Russia from West Germany by having the cordon sanitaire, basically, which would be Poland and Ukraine now, and try to separate Russia by controlling Eastern Europe. So that's what he focused on.
I think I've pulled you on a tangent far enough from the original slides. Let's get back to the second policy coup that you've got lined up for us on slide 7.
Yeah.
What is the second policy coup?
Yeah, I might as well just finish that thought, though. It's
sure.
It's George Kennan.
You were done.
It's George Kennan and John Lewis Gaddis that were later on at Yale that started the strategies of containment, and then that's what started the grand strategies class that Zbigniew Brzezinski went to. Well, he was at Harvard, but they went back and forth. And Paul Wolfowitz and that whole PNAC crowd. So I went from Mackinder to what these people are doing now, where Wesley Clark is talking about the small group runs it. So it's Harvard and Yale, basically grand strategies classes. There's other places that teach it, but I want to focus on those two. And yes, those people go into the CIA ever since Allen Dulles, and they basically run it. That's what he was talking about. So, all right. So you're on slide set. You're on
7.
slide 6. What are you
7.
on? You're on 7.
Do you want me to be on 6?
Yeah, 7, I'll go to 6. Real 6. Okay, because in 6 we're talking about the destabilization strategies. We covered that. In Central Europe, Central Asia, the United States was in a destabilization strategy. In Operation Cyclone with Zbigniew Brzezinski, Grand Chessboard, to build off from Mackinder and Speakman. So then you can say that the PNAC crowd tried to reshape the Middle East because they figured, well, they defeated Germany and rebuilt Germany, which was already an industrialized country, so you're reindustrializing it. So they figured, because I've talked to tons of these people, they figured that they could go into the Middle East and make it a second world or a first world country. The cultures are not the same, to say the least. So the regime change, nation building part failed, and then with the pullout of Afghanistan, then it's right back to regime change destabilization policy, which is exactly what the PNET crowd is trying to obfuscate. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll stop there, and we'll let's go to another one, because I got where I'm going to go. It's coming up in the slides anyway, so I'm just going to wait until we get there. Okay, so the second aspect of this series of slide sets, because it's going to take a lot of shows to go through all the slide sets I got.
Yeah, just the first section that we're trying to get through today has 20 something slides, 24, 25, and the whole slide set is about 150 slides. So there is going to be more coming up for you guys. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and all that other stuff. All right, take it away, George.
Okay, so let's get to the second one. Let's see. All right, well, I'll just read it. The second important aspect of the series is understood to respect retired Wesley Clark's videos concerning how Cheney runs through a Wolfowitz Pentagon, wanted to accomplish 7 regime change nation building projects after 9/11 attacks. So in addition to Afghanistan, because they're already there by the time this is in 2007, he's first learning right after 9/11 where what other countries that they wanted to go into. He starts talking. He's in the Pentagon. An officer says they're going to go to Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran.
A lot of people have seen that clip. That clip's made its way around the world in the last 10, 15 years. But yeah.
Yeah, well, Brian Berletic had it on a couple of days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really good that he revived that, because I was kind of looking for it, and then I was like, okay, now I got it. Because it's looking at what Wesley Clark said back during his 2007 presidential run when he didn't go anywhere, to what the PNET crowd is saying today. Yeah, they're all in lockstep with this Putin is crazy thing, so they're staying away from the actual geopolitical analysis, which I just gave. Putin's not crazy. They tried to take over his ports and his pipelines and to shut down his economy. So what's he going to stand there and do nothing? Among other things. So then we're going to get to all right. So okay. So yeah, I already went over. We were doing regime change destabilization in with Zbigniew Brzezinski and Stansfield Turner in Operation Cyclone. Now, Stansfield Turner was a Navy guy, but John Lewis Gaddis taught the Grand Strategies classes at the Naval War College also. And for people that aren't familiar with the East Coast of the United States, Yale is in New Haven, Connecticut, and the Naval War College is in Newport, Rhode Island. So it's halfway in between Boston and New Haven. So you got Yale, Naval War College, and then Harvard in Boston, basically. Now, the Naval War College teaches this because post-Mackinder theory is heartland versus coastal periphery, land power versus sea power doctrines. So this is really super important. The Navy teaches the Grand Strategies classes. The Army and Marine Corps and Air Force do not. So if people are wondering how a small group of people can run the Pentagon, it's because these classes are not widely taken. I think you've seen in some of the comment sections, especially the old Felix Rex videos, where people would be like, why is George talking about these obscure theories? Well, these are the theories that run our government.
Are those Navy people in the comments? Is that what you're trying to say? There's Navy people in the comments when they take the classes?
Yeah. Okay. So this is why it's so good to play, the Fiona Hill or the Ann Applebaum, the Bill Kristol interviews, or there's other people. and then play Wesley Clark and then have me analyze it. Wesley Clark doesn't know how this cabal started. And I had a long conversation with some people last month. If you don't know how this network works, then you're really puzzled about who runs the government. But once you know that the professors from Yale and Harvard, go into government. Well, they went into government during the OSS CIA transition. Then they hire their students. Then they retire. They go work in the think tanks, and then they hire their students as they go. They push their students through the government agencies and then bring them out into the think tanks. Then big oil, big finance, and all these people support the think tanks. So you're kind of getting bribed on the way out. So that's how this cycle has worked, where elites can get their children, into these different government agencies and into these powerful think tanks, where you think we have democracy, but in actuality, only a small group of people is running it.
Give us a one sentence summary of what Operation Cyclone is.
Oh, that was when Zbigniew Brzezinski started funding the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in 1978 and 79. He's done several very good interviews. Zbigniew Brzezinski is a very smart man.
You mean basically what Hillary outlined is the people who are fighting now are the people we funded in the 70s and 80s? Remember that one little fallout she had where she actually spilled the beans? Pretty sure that was Hillary.
Well, yeah, that was Hillary testifying before Congress.
Oh, there you go.
When she was Secretary of State. So yeah, no, she's just being honest. I mean, everybody did it. Back then it was the Rambo movies and everything else, and everybody was all for it without knowing who or what these groups are. Zbigniew Brzezinski, in that video I have in that slide, he talks about they armed the Mujahideen, and he already talks about how for the billions of dollars that the U.S. and UK put in there in arms, he's talking about that was dwarfed of what the Sunni Muslim community was already putting in there. So he was saying it would have happened anyway. They just contributed, so they would have, just so they would be part of it.
Would it be a conspiracy theory to say that the Sunnis were also motivated by the American factor and just Zbigniew Brzezinski was not aware of it? Oh, look, those guys are doing the same thing that we're doing. I wonder who's helping them. And it turns out it's the same person funding, as in the same government funding both sides. Do you think that's possible, maybe? Or is that stretching it?
Oh, no, there's a lot of that goes on. I mean, back then it was General Zia al-Haq had assassinated the first Bhutto that was prime minister of Pakistan, and he was a hardcore Sunni Islamist. So he wanted to push back against atheistic Marxism in all the stands, because they're Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, all those stands. It's not just Afghanistan. They've always been Muslim. So he wanted to push back and export. He wanted strict fundamentalist Islam in Afghanistan and all the stands. So he was working with the Saudis. Not just the Saudis. I mean, just the people from the Arabian Peninsula to put Wahhabi Islam in all the stands. And the CIA thought it was a good idea.
Let's move on from Brzezinski, because we've been going for 50 minutes already, and we've still got a bunch of things to get through, and I don't want to cut this up in two pieces.
Oh, okay. So, all right. So the third purpose is to take that step back, as I was alluding to earlier, of how the government, principally the military-industrial complex, the CIA, and the State Department started working with Wall Street and the big multinational corporations. And in Stephen Kinzer's books, there's several videos on it. I got one.
Mm-hmm.
He starts talking about when Allen Dulles came over. He was during World War II. He was stationed in Bern, Switzerland, so he got to know the Swiss bankers. Before that is not in the 1930s. Oh, his parents were former diplomats in the United States. Also, they're from upstate New York and Manhattan. So they got law degrees in the 1920s. He went to GW, and I forget where his brother went, but they started working for Sullivan and Cromwell in Manhattan, and they are a big corporate law firm that fuses Wall Street financing to big multinational corporations working overseas, and started working with them to do overseas operations. So both of the Allen Dulles and his older brother, John Foster Dulles, were working with for Sullivan and Cromwell. Then in World War II, they went into the intelligence community. Truman, they left the government, went back to Sullivan and Cromwell during the Truman administration. When Eisenhower was elected in 52 and took over in January 53, he put Allen Dulles ahead of the newly formed CIA and his brother John Foster Dulles in head of the State Department, which is crucial because the CIA is covert operations and the State Department is overt diplomacy. So they had the overt and covert halves done. And they were used to working with big finance and big business. So that's the connection between the CIA, State Department, and global finance, because it's not just Wall Street. They're also in the UK, the City of London. For those that don't know, the City of London, not the municipality of London, but the City of London is a square mile where the banking community is. It has separate rules from the rest of the UK. And the banking rules are basically is that there are no rules.
It's like
So
as far as sovereignty, I believe it's like the Vatican and Washington D.C. Basically, it doesn't fall
more
within
like
jurisdictions.
more like the Vatican or Monaco.
Yeah, Monaco. There you go.
Yeah.
And regarding your earlier point, I just wanted to bring up the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, a really good book. If people haven't heard of it, maybe look into it. It basically ties into what George is saying. Continue, George.
Oh, actually, elaborate on that for just a minute, if you could.
Well, I read it. I read it a long time ago, but the point is, it's basically a how-to guide of taking down enemy economies, how they would subvert, among other things, Yugoslavia. But yeah, I don't want to talk too much about it because I can't remember all the details, honestly. But it is a good book, and it puts it out all there in black and white, so to say.
Yeah. So where are we? What slide are we on? Oh, yeah. Okay. So anyway, yeah. So the third point here is, this John Foster, the Dulles brothers started out fusing the CIA and the State Department with big finance and the multinational corporations, and basically it never changed. So we got to tie that back to what Wesley Clark was saying, because he's wondering how nobody debated on this policy, on this regime change destabilization policies or regime change nation building strategies. Nobody voted on it. And we were talking about it in the last video. I said, my big point about bringing this up in open debate is democracy is supposed to be about informed consent. But then when you look at the peanut crowd, because we're looking at Bill Kristol and Applebaum, they're not talking about the geostrategic aspects like we are. They keep on this false narrative of Putin needs a psychological evaluation, when if you just do simple game theory, if the United States tries to move in and take over his ports and pipelines, yes, he's going to push back. Yeah, so let's go on to the next.
No more Russian propaganda. I can't take it anymore. It's been an hour of Russian propaganda, and I'm going to call it quits now. I'm going to stop this recording, and we're going to continue in the next one, because I want people to come back tomorrow and watch some more Russian propaganda. Because I don't think many people have the patience or the time to have all this fed to them in one huge bite. Everybody who's stuck around this far. No, George.
Why don't we just finish our at 10 and go to?
No, we can't.
Okay.
We're doing this in two sets. We'll just stop recording now, and we'll come back in a bit. George, thank you for this installment. We'll be back in about 3 minutes in real time for you guys on YouTube. Remember to subscribe. We'll be back. We'll be back tomorrow probably. All right, taking it out with some music. Thank you, everyone.